In early September 2009, US forces raided a hospital supported by the Swedish Committee for Afghanistan in Wadak province. Soldiers searched the entire hospital and forced bedridden patients out of their rooms and tied up staff and visitors. On their way out, they ordered staff to report admissions of any suspected insurgents to the coalition forces. 1 week earlier, Afghan and NATO forces had raided a clinic in Paktika province, following reports of an opposition commander being treated inside. 12 individuals were, with the support of helicopters, firing rounds of bullet at the clinic. All these are instances where health facilities, health structures, and health workers have not been allowed to provide health care to people who really need it. More recently, this year, in Bahrain, health facilities have consistently been used as a tool in the military crackdown against protesters. Our team saw patients in villages across the country who have been severely beaten or tortured in jail. Schoolgirls who have been physically abused and threatened with rape. And patients in urgent need of specialist care but who refuse to go to hospital due to the high risk of arrest. All of the wounded that MSF managed to see in their homes were at risk of being arrested if they were to present themselves at health facilities, simply because they had been injured during protests in that country. As I conclude, I want to underscore 2 points. First, aid efforts undertaken to comply with the provisions of international humanitarian law to assist counterinsurgency strategies or to build states cannot be labeled humanitarian. It's simple. Humanitarian, as they are subservient to political objectives. They are not needs-based. The provision of humanitarian medical assistance, according to need, is not their main objective. It is rather a means to achieving another objective. It could be stability, it could be development of the community. All of that is important, but it's not humanitarian assistance. Second and most important, these different objectives often result in aid not reaching most in need. Counterinsurgency and state-building aid policies have a poor record of meeting the vital needs of civilians in a conflict situation such as Afghanistan. Development and state-building are different from humanitarian intervention. Both may be necessary, but if the difference is not made clear, lives will be lost. As David Reef wrote in his book, A Bed for the Night, Humanitarianism in Crisis, even at its best, humanitarian action is an emblem of failure. We could say that humanitarian action is not a solution to the crisis, rather an essential action in the absence of a solution. We are there because everything else has failed. Rather than building capacity among people, humanitarian assistance aims to restore their capacity to make choices. Providing aid in Somalia and in Afghanistan today is about as grim as it gets. Our staff are at constant risk of being shot or abducted. We may never be able to reach the communities most in need of help. Or we may have to, in doing so, we may have to compromise some of our independence in order to reach them. Is the humanitarian enterprise then an exercise in futility? Is there no longer a space in times of war to express sympathy for its victims? For the sake of scores of people who would lose their lives if truly humanitarian action, the kind that has no ulterior motive, becomes a romantic myth rather than the reality it still is today, I hope there is still some space for humanitarian action in the world. Thank you.
¿Cómo funciona la ayuda humanitaria dentro de la estructura de instituciones internacionales? Digo, el financiamiento, la fijación de prioridades, el llegar a la zona. Veo difícil separar materialmente la acción de los organismos internacionales, ya sea en acción militar o en acción de ayuda al desarrollo, del apoyo que pueden prestar a las instituciones humanitarias, no me quedó claro ahí en la presentación.
MSF is an independent organization. We have our own capacities, and we are quite independent in the decisions we make about which place to go, which countries to start operations, and how we start operations. Of course, we are in dialogue with some of the other big actors like the Red Cross, the UN. We talk to the governments, but in the end, the decision to start a program and what program to start is based on independent assessments that are carried out by our organization. Now, our ability to carry out these, of course, comes from the support of the public. We have about 5 million people around the world today who regularly support MSF. And 90% of our funding comes from individuals who give $20, $30 a month, etc. That allows us to remain independent. So, for example, we don't take money from the US government, we don't take money from the French government. Because in most places, if you are funded by some of these big countries with very strong interventionist policies, you are then seen as a party. You're not seen as independent. So our independence from institutional funding or government funding allows us to react rapidly. So we don't have to wait for funding before we go to Haiti after an earthquake, or Haiti is a wrong example because we were already working there. But to go to Turkey, for example, in March, where they recently had an earthquake. So the financial independence is one. Second is political independence. It's not just because you get money from that is not governmental that makes you independent. Independence is a state of mind. You have to be willing to sort of ask the tough questions, challenge some of the policies that exist, and then kind of try and address some of the imbalances that exist in these sort of situations.
Hi. So I understand the problem, the distinction between humanitarian and development work protocol, because I work in development. And I'm quite happy to say that we do keep So my question would be, you as MSF, as a humanitarian action organization, what activities is MSF carrying out to try and keep awareness as to this distinction? How is MSF making it clear that you're a humanitarian organization and that you're not involved with development activities?
First of all, I don't think I was in any of what I said. I was not trying to minimize the role that development organizations play. In fact, it's a very important sector. In fact, in many of the countries where services don't exist, development agencies have a big role to play. I was just trying to make the distinction a bit clear. MSF, of course, in all of the places where we work, there's an enormous amount of discussions and dialogue that go on with different actors on the ground. In conflict areas, of course, we speak to different actors. In Afghanistan, we speak to Taliban, but we also speak to the US government. In Somalia, we speak to all of the actors we have access to. But in countries where there is no conflict, we still talk to all of the stakeholders and kind of talk to them about who we are, what we do, and how we carry out our work. It is this kind of acceptance from the communities where we work in is absolutely important for us to be able to do our job. And also to be very humble about the limits of what we are able to do in a given situation. And I'll kind of give the example of tsunami. When the tsunami happened, of course, the whole world was shocked at the magnitude of what had happened. We received something like $110 million in the first week from the general public. But the problem was, as a humanitarian medical actor, there was very little for us to do in a tsunami affected countries. There are many reasons for that. One, in a tsunami, it's a big wave. People die or people survive, right? And all of the tsunami affected countries which had some reasonable amount of capacity to address. So Indonesia, Thailand, India, these are all countries with indigenous capacity to be able to respond to such natural disasters. And the needs were long-term. Infrastructure, schools, roads, bridges, livelihoods. And these are not things that we have expertise in. So we had this dilemma: what do we do with the money that we have? Because people have given us money to act in these countries and to provide assistance to people affected by the tsunami. So we made a very unusual decision. We actually wrote to everybody who gave us money and said, okay, we cannot use this money and you can have the money back. Now, that comes from knowing what your limits are. You have to be very clear about what you can do and what you can't do, and you have to be very honest about it and enter into a dialogue with the general public.
Realmente me interesó muchísimo su posición y su diferencia entre una acción llamada humanitaria con apoyo militar y una acción realmente humanitaria. Y en ese sentido, no solo en la brochure que tenemos, sino en su exposición, hizo especial hincapié en el principio de neutralidad. Pero al mismo tiempo se dice que puede llegar a ser testigos de excepción, denunciando graves violaciones a los derechos humanos o en situación de conflicto armado al derecho internacional humanitario. ¿Cómo en la práctica logran conciliar ser vistos con neutralidad por todas las partes en una situación de conflicto armado y al mismo tiempo esas partes saber que eventualmente Médicos Sin Fronteras puede ser, como se dice aquí, un testigo de excepción? Por ejemplo, en un tribunal ante los internacionales internacionalizados o ante la Corte Penal Internacional. Se me hace realmente muy difícil conciliar la posición de testigo con la actitud necesaria de neutralidad. Gracias.
No, this question is a handful. This is very good question. As I during my talk, one of the things that I stressed is all of our humanitarian principles, especially neutrality and independence, are operational tools in some sense. You have principles and you have action. If you are too principled, in many occasions you are not able to act. And if you are all about action, you have no principles. So MSF, in its every day in different countries around the world, we are trying to walk that fine balance between being principled and being pragmatic. Now, there are very few instances where we feel that we actually have to denounce a government. Very often that is when humanitarian aid is being diverted for some sort of war-related purposes. When there is no access for humanitarian actors, then we talk about it. And recently, of course, when health structures were being targeted and when safe spaces to provide and to receive care no longer existed, we talked about. Now, it's when we get to these levels of problems that we actually talk about. One good example is in '94 in Rwanda, where our staff witnessed horrible atrocities firsthand. And then later it was also, we started realizing that humanitarian presence was being instrumentalized. It was a way to attract people to certain areas, and then they were being targeted with violence. It was one incident, it was a rare incident in our 40-year history where we actually called for military intervention. And these instances are quite rare. And you're absolutely right about the ICC. As a matter of principle, we do not testify at the ICC. We do not. But there are rare instances. And you have to recognize this. We are all people, we are all individuals who are part of the societies we live in. We also have, apart from the conscience of the movement, we also have individual consciences. And there have been, on occasions, individual MSF workers in personal capacities testifying. For example, the Rwanda Tribunal is one such instance. So, in the end, we also have to exercise our free will. But as a matter of policy, institution, MSF does not testify at the ICC, even though we have received a lot of requests for information, etc. We, like you said, if it is known that we work in a place and we are giving information to international criminal courts and tribunals, etc., then you can be assured that our access is going to be limited. And today, everybody has access to internet. And all of these armed groups are incredibly savvy with the use of computers and the way they access information. So, integrity and credibility is absolutely important if we are to continue to have access in all of the places where we work.